Hi, you guys. Welcome to Becoming Her Again. I'm Renee Marie. I'm super happy that you are here. Thanks for joining me. If you've not been to my channel before, I'm glad that you stopped in. This is a place where I talk about healing from, heartbreak, divorce, breakups, grief. Job loss, anything like that. So, I go through a lot of topics that not only I've been through, but many other people are also going through. And so I hope that this is helpful. And if this is helpful to you, or if it's helpful to somebody that you know, if you could please pass along the video, that would be helpful for me. So thank you. And I hope that I'm able to help them as well. So again, glad that you're here. So today's topic I want to talk about is when love becomes emotional manipulation. So, a lot of times, I think that we are in relationships and we really don't see maybe what's happening right in front of us many times. So really, with love is supposed to obviously allow us to feel safe and valued and secure and be free to be ourselves. And sometimes in a relationship, it can shift from those things into feeling like you're losing control and that somebody else is maybe in control of the situation more than you, right? And manipulation, and emotional manipulation is not always very obvious. A lot of times it's very subtle and we don't see what's actually going on because it happens so gradually. You know what I mean? So a lot of times you're just going through your motions of your day-to-day life, and then you find yourself wondering, well, like, how did I get here? Like, what's going on right now? What did I miss to get to this point? So, if this is something that you've dealt with or you're dealing with, I hope that going through this is somewhat helpful, because I think just recognizing the signs and the situation that you may be finding yourself in, a lot of times that's when you're able to really recognize something and then adjust accordingly. Emotional manipulation, this is not always like, I'm not trying to put just like a label on this. We don't necessarily, like with this, have to diagnose the other person or label the other person that's in your life, or in a person's life that is bringing this manipulation to the table. It doesn't have to be somebody that's specifically narcissistic, or has a specific personality disorder, but it can happen still without that being the case, and the relationship still can become very emotionally unhealthy. So those are the things that we need to watch out for when we're in any relationship, no matter what they are, no matter how long you've been in them, and to be able to recognize those red flags, because those are very important. So a lot of times the question that you might want to ask yourself is, what is this relationship doing to me, right? So you want to step back a little bit and think, okay, if I'm seeing some of these strange behaviors, what is this doing to me? And then ask yourself, how do I feel about being in this relationship? Because a lot of times, when we're so wrapped into that relationship, we don't see the tsunami going on around us. We only see what's happening in that moment, and we're usually trying to get out from under the big amount of water that's holding us under, right? I mean, we're really striving to just get through that minute a lot of times, maybe with this other person. So we don't really see how this how you're really feeling in the relationship, especially when you've not been able to, at this point, recognize these red flags of somebody being, emotionally manipulating to you. So if you ask yourself those questions, they're really going to help you to break down what is kind of even taking place. And it's going to help you to be able to recognize what could be happening right in front of you. So those are two very important questions to ask. Some of the signs that, the relationship might be becoming unhealthy on an emotional level, there can be several signs, but I'm going to give you some examples of these because I want you to think about these and ask yourself, is this something that maybe you're facing, right? And if it is, it's good to have the understanding of, some possibilities and ideas of what could be happening when this relationship turns that direction. So, because you might have been in the relationship and maybe it wasn't turned into that direction yet, but maybe now it's turning that way. And so some of the questions that, I encourage you to ask yourself as you're thinking this through is, do you feel like you're constantly needing to prove that you love this person? Do you feel guilty for having needs and your opinions about certain things? And maybe even boundaries, right? Maybe you have boundaries and that's something that you're feeling guilty because you have these boundaries and they're being walked all over or pushed through. A lot of times you're finding yourself that the other person's emotions always seem to take priority over your emotions. You are finding yourself walking on eggshells. You're constantly trying to prevent conflict. You're thinking ahead, like you're thinking, oh my goodness, well, this, like, let me read the room. This is definitely not a good night to bring this up, right? I mean, because, I don't want to lead to any problems. So when you're constantly doing that, you're constantly putting their needs above your own. So that's just another example. Saying no to them, maybe that leaves you feeling like you're flooded with guilt. You're feeling, withdrawn, because you said no, and you're honestly feeling that heat and that pressure from that other person because you can tell that they're kind of punishing you. Maybe they've switched it and now they are giving you the silent treatment because you said no, or you kind of put your foot down and said that this isn't something that you're comfortable with, whatever that may be. But you apologize simply to restore the peace, even when you're not sure what you did wrong. You feel responsible for, their emotional well-being. You start changing your behavior to avoid their reactions. And you stop expressing your true feelings just because you don't feel like it's safe to do that anymore. And then when you slowly start becoming less and less like yourself, those are definitely warning signs. So one of the biggest warning signs, that you can really start to see here is that, you're constantly thinking, how do I say this without upsetting them? Should I even bring it up? Maybe I should just totally let it go, right? And what can I do to make things okay again? So what happens is your focus, it becomes about keeping the peace instead of being about yourself. So what's happening in this process of these things, and when you're so concerned about this other person and their feelings and, all of that, you are no longer even focused on yourself whatsoever. You are fully focused on the relationship, number one, and fully on that person. And you forgot about yourself. You don't even know you exist, right? So, manipulation doesn't always look like it's very intentional. But it isn't necessarily about someone plotting to control you all the time, but it's a pattern that develops between two people. And it's just this constant, cycle of, quite honestly, emotional manipulation, and it's a very abusive situation, quite honestly. And, their intention, right, doesn't erase what it's doing to you and the impact that it actually has on your emotional state of mind and well-being. It's not good. And regardless, of why it's happening, I mean, it's important to really just pay attention to how it's affecting you. I mean, what is this doing to you? And, and this is exactly, I'll give you a small portion of myself. This is exactly what started happening to me, is that I started to really realize that it wasn't about, just what was going on with this other person. It was about how this was affecting me. It was affecting me on such a level of brokenness. I felt completely shattered by this constant situation of manipulation, and that is in fact what it was. So at some point or another, when we don't recognize what's happening, it is just chipping away at us, and then we're going to become to the point where we are just absolutely shattered, and we don't even know how to pick ourselves up off the floor. And that's what I don't want to happen to any of you listening, because that is the whole purpose of my channel. I don't want anybody else to go through the things I went through, because it was horrible. It was a terrible feeling. It's a terrible thing to feel shattered and then try to figure out how to put yourself back together. It's not good. So, it does a lot of damage to us, on every level. It's not just one level, it's on every level. So this is why these are such important topics to talk about and to really recognize for yourself. Love, let's get into this. Love versus emotional manipulation. So, healthy love, I want to give you these examples so you can kind of think about this on that level, what love looks like compared to emotional manipulation or manipulation in general, right? But healthy love, allows you to say no to something. Healthy love doesn't require you to constantly prove that you're loyal to this person. If you're showing up and you're loyal to them all the time. It's not going to change from day to day. You just are who you are. This healthy love allows both people to have feelings and be able to voice those feelings in a healthy way. And it doesn't require one person to sacrifice their identity while the other person gets to keep, being this happy person, right? And love should not require you to have to self-abandon your own self. So when you are doing that, and if you find yourself in those situations, that's when you know right there, right then and there, you are in a situation that is not healthy and it is not okay. So this is when now we need to start asking ourselves, we got to change our perception of this. You might think all these great things about this person, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you are asking yourself these questions. Like, let me give you some examples. If you're asking what's wrong with them, or, why are they treating me that way? Well, that really doesn't matter either. Instead, we at those points, when we start to recognize this, we have to ask ourselves the questions differently. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because you're not used to doing that. So this is where you have to change it. You're internalizing it, you're personalizing it. Why are they doing that? Why are they treating me this way? But instead, now we need to say, why don't I feel like I'm myself anymore? Why am I constantly feeling like I'm giving up the majority of who I am as a person to keep this relationship working? Can I express my needs without feeling punished for having them? And here's another good one. Do I feel emotionally safe here? And when you start to shift your thoughts on these questions and you start putting it more onto yourself and how you're feeling and what you're starting to recognize, that's when change can really happen. Because, again, we can't change, we can't fix anything until we recognize what's going on. And then I always say too, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So if you're in the spot where you haven't seen it yet, but maybe you're finally getting there, you're finally, starting to recognize things and starting to see things, I want you to start asking yourself those types of questions, because that's when you're really able to get a full understanding as to what could be actually going on right in front of you. And, you just didn't know it. And so knowing is half the battle, right? And you don't have to prove. I don't want you to feel like you got to prove that somebody's toxic, or that you want to despise them for the rest of your life, or that that they are clinically diagnosed as a narcissistic person. It doesn't, you don't have to do that. This isn't about that. Really, this is about you. This is about you as a person and what's going on internally inside of you. But if you are constantly feeling anxious, confused, diminished, controlled, disconnected from yourself, then that right there are all red flags. And they deserve 150% attention from you to be put on to those subjects, because something's wrong. Something is wrong. And I'm going to tell you, most of us have a still small voice inside of us, right? Where, we're like, something's not really feeling right, So, we have to look at that. And it doesn't matter who this person is or how long they've been there or any of that. They are who they are right now. And they're making the choices to put you through that. And so I'm going to tell you right now, it deserves your 150% of your undivided attention on this, because this is not okay. And what it will do is it will shatter you into pieces if you do not stop and recognize it and focus on it and put yourself first, period. It's just that simple. Because once a manipulator, they're always going to be a manipulator. I'm sorry to tell you, but they just are. So, if a person is doing this to you, then you need to recognize these signs and get away from it. A lot of times, it might even have a bigger message here. Sometimes it's, maybe just the bottom line of the bigger message is, this relationship is not healthy for me. It doesn't really have to be like all of these other things. But if you're seeing that somebody is emotionally manipulating you and trying to twist things around, and, a lot of times, people that do that, they're also gaslighters, they're good at all that, So, if this relationship isn't healthy for you, then it's time to move on with your life, because they will shatter you, and then you will be left to figure it out all on your own. And that is just not a healthy thing for you. So if you look at it from a bigger message like that, bigger picture, it moves the focus away from even worrying about the other person and putting a label on them, to fully, starting to grasp and understand yourself, your needs, your boundaries, and your well-being. And that's what this comes down to. Our well-being has to be there. We have to be taken care of for ourselves, because we can't function in any relationship. You know what I mean? We could be leaving that relationship and be in the most perfect relationship of the world. Well, you still can't function, because once you're shattered and you are feeling like emotionally manipulated by a person and you have just been so beaten down, I promise you, no relationship is going to feel good, because you are broken, because the relationship has sucked and drained you dry to the point where now after being out of it maybe for so long, you're seeing that this relationship wasn't healthy for you. So, I really want you to think about that and, just ask yourself, is this relationship healthy for me? And start kind of going through some of those thoughts that, we talked about when it comes to, the questions that you should ask yourself, to see what's happening here, right? But, I want you to remember that, you're allowed to, first of all, have feelings. And if something is hurting you, you shouldn't have to prove why this is hurting you. You know what I mean? Like in the relationship that I was in, I always had to prove my point. But my point was it never made any sense. It never even mattered what my point was because it was always twisted. But you should be allowed to have, your own feelings of what hurts you or what you're feeling without proving why you have that. You should be allowed to have a boundary without feeling guilty. And I know I haven't gotten into boundaries yet. We're definitely gonna talk about that. Boundaries is something I did not have when I was in my relationship. However, I had one boundary, it was that I tried to have, which was, I need time to process, so I need to walk away. And that was not something that I was able to do in that relationship. It always created a problem. But that's an example of a boundary. And we should not have to feel guilty for having a boundary to walk away from a situation when somebody is, beating us down, basically, emotionally. And, I want you to remember that, you're allowed to want a relationship, and if you're not in it right now, don't stress. But maybe one day down the road, you can want a relationship where you can be yourself. There are relationships that allow that, and you should be able to be yourself. I think we all should be able to be ourselves, and we should not have to feel bad about it. It's different if you're, acting rude towards the other person, but if you're not and you're just being yourself, you should absolutely be allowed to be yourself. And you're allowed to walk away from the dynamics that are continually requiring you to abandon yourself just to keep this relationship going. Even if you stay in the relationship and you're continuing to be under this pressure and this stress and this abusive manipulation tactics, it is going to slowly erode at you, and you are going to find yourself in pieces. It won't be overnight. It takes time. It's a slow fade. It really is. But I don't think any relationship is worth that. Your emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is so valuable as a person. I mean, I honestly would rather be alone for the rest of my life than to ever be in a situation where somebody is doing that to me again. It's just not, it's not fair. It's not fair at all. I have so much to bring to the table, and that's what I want you to remember, the value that you hold. You have so much to bring to the table, and you're a wonderful person. You're a wonderful woman, and you're caring and loving and compassionate and empathetic, I'm sure. And, you have so much to offer, and that is just making yourself, require such a little amount from a person. If they can't even give you the simple respect to not manipulate you and not treat you that way, if they supposedly love you, then that's pretty sad. Again, I don't know about you, but I would rather be alone forever than to deal with that. That's just not okay, you know? We're valuable, and we need to be treated as such. And, you know, I want you to remember these things, because love does not require you to slowly erase who you are as a person. And, you know, as you go through looking back at this conversation, I want you to think about, is this something happening in your life? And if so, what can you do to start moving out of this? Write those couple questions down and start thinking this through, because you are so worth protecting. 100% you're so worth it, you know? So I don't want you to forget that, my friend. I really don't. But, you know, I hope that this helps some. If you know, felt like this message spoke to you at all, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for that. If you do, maybe like the video. It just helps me get the word out to other people. But, you know, if there's somebody, like I said earlier, that you can maybe share this with, that hopefully it would help them, please pass it on. You know, I'm trying to make a difference for women out there. I know that it is, you know, it's tough, you know, it's a tough situation. But I would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, put them down below in the comments. I definitely will get back to you. I really, you know, I really care about you all, and I don't want anybody out there to go through this. And I hope that this, you know, helps to give you some insight, you know, just so you don't lose yourself, just to keep this relationship going. And, you know, and then, you know, just take care of yourself in the meantime, you know, and make sure that you are giving yourself a lot of grace and a lot of love. And Lily and I will see you in the next video, okay? All right. Bye, friends. Take care. See you soon.